Good morning and welcome to Homes and Lifestyles Canada. I'm Kim Hayden, veteran agent and your host. Today we're going to talk about shifting marital and family situations. Whether you're getting married for the first time or find yourself recently divorced, we'll discuss ways you can navigate the challenges to your legal, financial, and emotional well-being. It's very easy to get caught up in the emotional challenges related to marriage and divorce, both positive and negative, but nonetheless, it's very important to find the time to address the legal and financial details associated with them as well. With me today is Jeff Kahane of Kahane Law and Jeremy Nagel of Canada Mortgage Direct. Also joining us is provisional psychologist Kimberly Nelson. Who better to help us through these changes than lawyers, broker, and a psychologist? So Jeff, from a legal point of view, what is the first thing a person should do when their relationship starts changing, when they're going through this change? You see lots of it.
Sure, you do. And there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think a big part of people's fear comes from when they just don't know what the rules are and what to expect, because there's a lot of things that they hear from their friends and TV and coworkers, and they're just not sure. So the first step, I'd say, sit down with a psychologist. That's the next step.
Do that. I know a good one.
Where do you want to start from?
That's good.
All right. As a first step, I'd say sit down with a lawyer and even if you just sat with them for 1 hour, and you can just do 1 hour, there's no further obligations, and then you can find out what your legal situation is and know what your rights and what to expect from the whole situation from a legal side is. Because once you have that knowledge, it takes away a little bit of the fear, and you'll know what to do and not to do so you don't get yourself into trouble.
So no dead fishes down the chimneys.
No dead fishes down the chimney.
We want to be careful.
Good legal advice always.
Good legal advice. Jeremy, when we're looking at finances, so if you're dealing with a house and we have a separation here, what are some steps people can take in order to prepare themselves for the, dispersing of all those finances, or if one wants to keep a house and not?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing I always say is continue making your payments as you normally would. Sometimes we have the odd individual who feels, it's not really my payment, or I don't want to make it. One of the worst things you could possibly do. Aside from speaking with your legal counsel, get in touch with your mortgage broker. Sit down with us, have a consultation as to your finances, because there's things that we can do today to help you through that. Another instance we've seen is an individual who felt they don't have a car. So what do? Go out and buy a vehicle right away. Well, that can impact their purchasing of their next home.
Yes,
Absolutely.
And I've actually seen that personally. You go out and buy a car or even test drive, and it affects everything on your credit score, right?
Absolutely, credit inquiries, yeah.
So, Kimberly, what are some of the, I hear these mediators come in to relationships and sometimes can draw things out. What are some of the, tips or advice that you can provide to somebody? Maybe not to argue so much, maybe be able to get through, hey, we both want to go away our separate way. What's the next step?
Right, so often this is a very traumatic and tumultuous time for people. It's not the norm that people are, super collaborative. Often if they were, they wouldn't be getting divorced or breaking up, etc. So often the skills aren't there for really productive conversations, and especially if they're heightened in tension and sometimes around traumatic experiences. So it's good to seek out support, both personally, like in your social support, to make sure that you have the adequate professional support, such as counselors or lawyers, etc., and to proceed as fairly as you can, not just for right now and what feels good for now, but for yourself in the future, and especially for kids.
So Jeff, what about prenuptial agreements? Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little bit, when should that be approached, or should it be?
Well, a prenuptial agreement, cohabitation agreement, postnuptial agreement, they're all the same thing. They're all a document that plans for if things were to fall apart. People say, oh, that's so unromantic, we don't want any part of that. But it's kind of like insurance on your house. Everyone gets insurance on their house in case their house burns down, but no one's really expecting their house to burn down. You say the same thing in business, where you have unanimous shareholders agreements. So while everyone's happy, let's work together and figure out, okay, if this doesn't work out, what's a fair way of making things split so we can go our own ways without really tearing at each other and spending all your money on lawyers? And I mean, really, while it's good for business, we don't want that. We want people to, if people can talk and get along well and not get all worked up and start coming from an emotional place, then the whole process will go smoother. It's a lot of what we do is counselor, but your money's better spent psychologist, working with the lawyers for the legal untangling, and the agreements, they just help make that so much smoother.
Agreements, just being preventative.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
being preventative. Now, one of the questions I have, Jeremy, is when people are separating their finances, I have a lot of people that have asked, how do I stay in the house? So a lot of women who have the children want to stay in the home. Do they always have to sell the house? Do they are there ways that these women can stay, or men, maybe men? I'm sorry, maybe men, but is there alternative or bridge financing? How do they go about getting that separated and stay with the property?
Sure, I mean, that's a great question. I think if there is any good coming from this, it would be from the financial aspect, in that today, while we can only refinance the 80% loan to value, in a separation situation or divorce or dissolution of marriage, we have the ability to go back up to 95%, providing we're using those funds to pay out matrimonial debt and buyout of spouse. So is it possible? Absolutely.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Up to 95. I just assumed it was still the 80%. That's a brilliant information. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Kimberly, how can couples talk their way through kind of, the possible ending of the relationship and without creating animosity? Like, do you have a few tips, like who gets to hold the baton? Or
Well, and things that might be important to one person in the couple might not be as important. Like somebody might be willing to fight over that Pez collection, and maybe the other person is more than happy to let the Pez go, so it's really having conversations about what things are most important to each of you as you go forward, and you may find that you're willing to give on topics that you thought you might have to fight over, and vice versa. When it comes to kids especially, people can often be motivated to find a way to get along collaboratively as they end the relationship for the health of the kids, right? So that's often a big motivator.
And so how can somebody, through dialogue or counseling, get prepared for that prenup and open that dialogue?
Yeah, so one thing that we find in counseling is when people spend a lot of time in the preparation stage of change, they're more likely to be successful. So whether that comes with marriage preparation classes, can be as simple as communication classes. I know Gottman is a really popular one. So it teaches really structured communication skills, and there are lots of therapists that offer Gottman style courses, for example. So the prenup, if you're able to negotiate about money and the future what if, ironically, you might be less likely to end up there. So that preparation stage, whether communication or explicit communication about financial boundaries and expectations, can actually prevent you from ending up dissolving your relationship down the road.
And you've drawn up those, I'm sure.
We have, and part of the other side, and I think it ties in, is that when people know what's going to happen if down the road, then it takes some of that fear away and lets them, I think, even work on their marriage in a different way than if they're being protective, or if they're just not, they're afraid of moving on, afraid of what it's going to look like, so they don't say anything, and then there's just a big explosion. Because that's, again, it comes back to when people are angry, or when their infidelity or whatever it is that causes that emotional something, it's so much harder to bring it back in to keep everything going smoothly.
Yes, and when you got so many things, you got a home on there, you got kids on there, you got cars on there, you got finances, you have everything. So it's a huge thing.
Can I add that, and one of the things is that we have a lot of expectations that are implicit, and so one of the things about something like a prenup or having premarital work is that you're making these assumptions that you have explicit, so then you can negotiate them ahead of time, so that you're not defining infidelity differently, and then it happens and you're like, well, no, that wasn't. Yeah, it was, so that preparation step is important again.
Communication, respect.
Communication. I think that just should be an overall theme for everything we do here. So Jeremy, are there any steps that people can take when they're looking at a split and they're assessing the home, they're assessing the property?
Sure, I mean, we'll need an appraisal. Again, in some cases, depending on who's buying who out, we'll take care of that appraisal end. Sometimes they want an independent third party. We can do that as well, make referrals, etc. But that's an important piece. We need to know what that value looks like. We also need the separation agreement. That is crucial. Because again, when we're refinancing, we can only pay out as per the separation agreement. No more, no less. So if someone wants to go on a vacation trip to Hawaii, unfortunately, we can't take that out of the proceeds. It's not allowed.
Oh, no Hawaii.
No Hawaii.
No Hawaii. And what about common law relationships versus, marriage law? Is there much difference there, or?
So the rules are mostly similar. There are some subtle differences, and if you're in those situations, it's worth talking to a lawyer to find out the legal differences. But for the most part, there's a lot of similarity. You wouldn't get a prenuptial agreement because you're not contemplating pre-nuptials, pre-getting married. It'd be that cohabitation, we're living together. And people will try and find ways to get around the rules of getting a cohabitation prenuptial agreement and have rental agreements and things like that. Those don't work. Like, don't try and circumnavigate something with pretend law.
Pretend law.
It's better to do it the right way. And the same is with the separation agreements. There's a lot of rules around separation agreements and what's required. People can spend a lot of time drafting their own or looking online, and it is often more cost effective just to get the lawyer to draft it all, because then you're not paying money for them to review the whole thing, figure out what's there and what's wrong and what's missing, because that's harder, it takes more time to figure out what's missing, and then redo it. You just put it all together. Person is represented by one lawyer, they have to get independent legal advice for the other party to the relationship, and then it's a legal firm thing. You can't just have it notarized.
Okay, real quick, clarify dowers rights.
So dower rights is a right with respect to property. So if two people are married, one person is on title and the other person is not, and if either of the two people have lived in the property since the time of their marriage, then dower rights apply. It means that the person who's not on title has a life interest in the property. They can live there as long as they can until they die. If there's a mortgage, obviously the mortgage has to get paid, but a person can't put a new mortgage on without getting the consent of the dower person. Very different than equitable rights. So equitable rights would be like the divorce, who gets the money, the equity in the house. You can have a situation where a person has no dower rights. So people, they're high school sweethearts living together for 50 years, assembled 100 rental properties. They've never lived in any of them, no dower rights, but a big equitable interest. And the reverse, you can have people who come together in a relationship, get married, move into one of the two people's house, and there are dower rights, but if they get divorced the next day, very little equitable rights. So completely separate concepts.
And this is why we need a lawyer, because half of that I better never divorce Doug, because that's a lot of equitable.
A lot of paper.
Okay, a lot of paperwork. So when children are involved, how do you talk about the situation?
As soon as you say when children are involved, one of the things that pops out is when like ex-spouses or parents speak badly of the other person, and that causes so much stress and strain on the child because that parent is a part of them too. Yes. And children don't have the same perspective that we do as adults, and so often they can think it's their fault or they could have prevented it somehow. And when children get caught in the middle, sometimes they need to be told, like, it's okay to still love your mom or your dad, or and to make sure that they have things as normal as possible, so they still get to see the other. And this is aside from the legal rights. I mean, just as their human needs.
Human needs,
yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what? Yeah. I agree with you 110%. If I can share anything, I am a child of divorce, which was a good thing. But my mother, her superhero power was she never ever spoke poorly of my father to me, because I look so much like him. I've got his eye color. This is not my real color hair, but my real color hair is his color. And my mother did that. She never spoke. So during my formative years as a teenager, I never took that on. Yeah. I never thought that when he was behaving poorly, I would behave poorly, or that my mother didn't love me because I looked like him, or she would look at me and be reminded of him. So that is the biggest thing that if I can share with anybody out there is don't talk poorly about your spouse, because it all just comes back, and the kids are or ex-spouse. So when nobody likes to think of the final, which is death, right? But I'm getting much older, and I see more of it. I go to more funerals and baby showers now. So so when we look at this, how should somebody write their will, accommodate their property, and prepare emotionally, especially when we have, you know, there's diseases out there, there's all sorts of things out there. So start me with the will, because I don't have one. I'm just hoping somebody takes my cat.
So, I mean, a will and a will kit, so not just a will, but enduring power of attorney and a personal directive are probably the single best example in law of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, because everyone's going to die, and I
you don't get out of
anyone
this.
in particular, but
Yeah,
it's
you don't
going
get
to
out of
happen
it
at some
alive.
point. So a will definitely come into play. And there are times where the law, if you don't have a will match what your wishes are, but you don't know who's going to look after your kids, setting up trusts in the will, and all this is included. Like, it doesn't cost extra to set up a trust for your money, for your to look after your kids, and to have it so, you know, at 18 years old, suddenly they don't have a big windfall. Enduring power of attorney, stuff you should have like right through the whole process, so that someone can deal with your assets if you can't make decisions for yourself. So they really are a key part of the law and real estate for sure, but life in general.
So death, nobody likes to look at it.
Yeah, I would echo Jeff's a pound of prevention, because we all know people who have been caught up in, you know, disputing a will, or maybe decisions made at end of life, and families can be torn apart, relationships, you know, terribly damaged. And if those wishes had been made clear and known ahead of time and communicated, it can prevent lots of damage in families and relationships. It's probably one of the key things I would recommend.
And people, when you talk about the expectations of people's wishes, you have people who try and beat the system by either transferring properties or doing things which may make sense to make a minor problem easy, but can create a huge problem down the road. So for instance, we're going to add the kids onto mom's property, or one of the kids onto mom's property or dad's property, so that when they pass, we don't have to go through probate and that process. But that process can cause all kinds of other legal issues, whether it's you know, an asset tax issues, or an asset that's being claimed by somebody's creditor, or, you know, a family relationship breakdown, which no one wants to think about, but we see happen. And one of the kids says, "I'm not giving your house back." So you have to be very cautious with those kind of things.
Absolutely. And I've always been curious what happens with the mortgage, like when there is a death. Like, how do you navigate, or how do you negotiate a house?
Well, one of the things that Jeff just alluded to about putting somebody on title, if it's a younger child, well, they may lose their right to the first-time homebuyer's privilege. That's one. It's a big thing that we see today. From the mortgage aspect, insurance is a big thing, and unfortunately, we don't see enough of it. Not necessarily mortgage insurance, a personal insurance separate and apart from the mortgage is always helpful. Unfortunately, I've had 4 pass away on me in 15 years. Of those 4, none of them had any insurance outside of their workplace.
So an ounce of prevention, ounce of prevention. So, you know, we know that this morning was, this is a tough topic. This is a tough topic, not what everybody wants, but it's great information, because as we just said, an ounce of prevention, being, you know, knowledgeable of what we're tackling and what we're going up against. But, you know, like my friends, they are cherishing a new role and moving forward in a positive manner. So I'd like to thank Jeff, Kimberly, and Jeremy for joining me today. Thank you. Be sure to go online to homesandlifestyles.ca for more of this panel and information to see the full discussion. Big thanks to our sponsors, Kahane Law, Canada Mortgage Direct, A&A Interiors, and Design.